live stream. Forgot about that.
Hi, everybody. Now can you hear me? I feel like I should do some karaoke.
Let's do
We
it.
could do
Let's
some
do
good
it.
karaoke. So I'm Lori Cristofero, Assistant Superintendent at Lockport Township High School, and this is my good friend, Dr. Kip Klein, who is the Dean of the College of Education and Social Science here at Lewis University, and I'm so happy he said yes when I said, hey, could we co-host this? You could bring some of your graduate students, invite whoever you want. We would love to have the CADCA crew here because we thought we needed a bigger space to hear Dr. Jean Kerns, who we will introduce in a few minutes. So thank you for being here after testing. Thank you for being here on a Friday in late April when we know any other thing could be on your desk and is surely going to be sitting there when you get back. So thanks. I'm going to turn it over to Kip.
Thank you, Lori, my friend. We will not be doing a karaoke duet at this time.
We're going to start practicing.
But now that idea is out there in the universe, no, my favorite part about you all being here is that we love to have our district partners and our K-12 partners here with us any chance we get. So thank you so much for being here. And my favorite part of the planning was when Lori came over to check out the room and the technology available, and we sent Katie a text of those overhead projectors and said, do you think this will work? And it was, yeah, it wasn't even April Fool's, but it was something like that. So thank you all for being here. It's wonderful to host CADCA here at Lewis University. Again, we are so indebted to your work and have so much respect for what you do. We can't do what we do without you doing what you do. So thanks so much. I know we have a different level of partnership with each of you. If you're interested in seeing about what other partnership opportunities we have. We've done some really cool things I'm going to have Lori talk about in a minute with Lockport that are available to the rest of you as well. I do want to introduce Dr. Liz Sturm, who is a department chair for the education department here at Lewis University. We've got all kinds of material. Of course, you coming here obligates us to share with you all of our programs and the materials that we have. If you've got yourself or any of your staff who might be interested, we've got a variety of graduate and advanced programs that you can learn more about or take some information back to your staff. We do, I know everybody else does it too, but we do kind of a smorgasbord of modality, so we can kind of meet you where you are and your staff where they are in terms of providing some access and even a little bit level of convenience for furthering your education. We think we've got the strongest programs around in the area, so maybe that sets us apart a little bit. You may not know this, but Lewis University, our patron saint of the institution is John Baptiste de La Salle, who's also the patron saint of educators. So we think that sets us apart. We take it very seriously because of that legacy. And part of taking that seriously is being creative and innovative, which we have been with Lockport Township High School. And just a couple minutes on our partnership, Lori.
Oh, okay. So many of us do partnerships with colleges in the area, and sometimes barriers come up. And my favorite thing about working with Kip, and I hope he feels the same way, we never say, this is it, we can't do it. We figure out ways to go over, under, around, to make it happen for kids. And so I love that we have the same vision, that we believe when students step foot on this campus, it is a different experience than when we can do dual credit in the classroom. That is a really good, really important experience too. It's really great when we can take students on college visits to see what it looks like, but it's totally different when you're stepping on a college campus, you're having a class with a college instructor. The kids get to feel, our students, our seniors mostly, we're moving in a little bit of juniors, they get to feel like, what does a college experience feel like in the classroom, Lewis University does a wonderful job of giving students a orientation where they get to see the library and the other resources that are available to them when they come here. Kip and I tried to take them to a volleyball game because their men's program here is like ranked nationally. People didn't want to hang out with us though for that event. We tried to do a play. They didn't want to hang out with us for that event because we were really interested in what kids were saying. We love it that kids can end their experience, yes, with transferable college credit, but they can go, oh, I liked being on a smaller campus. I want a bigger campus. Lewis is the right size. Lewis is not the right size. It is far enough away from home. It's not far enough away from home. So all these things they can start to think about, and most importantly, a lot of our classes are intro. So intro to social work. A student can go, I do want to go into social work, or that was way the wrong thing, before they step on a college campus and spend lots and lots of money to not be on at the right place or in the right field. So I always am happy to champion the partnership, and I would just say this to you, that if you wanted a partnership with Lewis, they will say yes to you too. It's not like, oh, it's exclusive, Lockport only. They are open. You know, we built something that we're like, heck yeah, we should go and replicate that in other places. So, and I will just say one other thing. I do have the honor of serving on the College of Education Social Science Advisory Committee here, and I love working with KIPP in that capacity, and just hearing about the holistic innovation that they're doing. Like, you have to talk about the new Spanish programs that you're offering to students, because we think that's another gateway for students to have experiences here.
Thank you, Lori. There's a lot there to follow up on, but I won't do it because we have I won't do all of it because we're standing in the way of our keynote here this afternoon. But I do want to say just a couple of things. This program is incredible mostly because Lori and Lockport Township High School District has been an incredible partner. I know all of you are also potential incredible partners, and you're right, I will say yes, not just to you, but to everyone. And what's great about this partnership, as Lori said, is there's a lot of, yes, let's find a way to do that. So if you think, well, my district is geographically doesn't make sense for this kind of a partnership, you might be wrong about that, because we're really creative about how we attack these things. So just give us a call, give Dr. Sturm a call, give me a call, give Lori a call, and we can have a conversation. We have certainly been adding districts to this partnership that we think is really important to give students, again, that exposure, not just to the curriculum of a college course like you get in dual credit, but the actual experience. And by the way, we teach these courses with our full-time faculty, not with adjuncts, 100%. Because we want the students to get the full and authentic college experience so that, again, they can begin to weigh choices that they would otherwise have to do after they've made a commitment to an institution. And we think this is a better way, to approach that for kids who might already be thinking about, maybe I want to try social work, maybe I want to try teaching, maybe I want to try this or that, and then find out that, oh yeah, I actually do, or no, I actually don't. And those are all good questions to have answered, before you actually commit to a 4 or 5 year process at an institution. So we're willing to do whatever it takes to make it work for your district and for us. And again, thanks to Lori for being such a great partner to us, as the rest of you are, and will continue to be. So thank you for all of that. And I do want to say, again, you can see Dr. Sturm or stop at the table if you want to take any of that literature back to your staffs when you leave today.
I think you should just say really quick, some of the college offerings are now fully bilingual.
Yeah, that's right. So you may have heard in the news that we are in the middle of a merger with St. Augustine College, which was the first institution of higher education in the state of Illinois to have a bilingual curriculum, right? And so now I won't get into the weeds of it, but we're through one phase of that merger, and we're waiting on the U.S. Department of Education. If any of you have worked with them, you know that we have no idea. We have no idea. We have no idea when the second phase is going to be complete, and no, we actually do have some idea, but not as precise an idea as we would like. At any rate, we are in the process and about really to the end of the process of merging with St. Augustine, which is now St. Augustine College at Lewis University, and we will be offering programs in a dual language approach, and that does include early childhood education, and that does include social work, and it will potentially include other majors that might be of interest to you in the future. So we're really happy to work with that community. It has prompted us to also work with our Spanish-speaking community in Will County as well. And so we've got a lot of things going on there as well in our partnership between Lewis University and the migrant community and the Spanish-speaking community in Will County. So we're excited about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kip. Can you give him a round of applause? Thank you for co-hosting with us. I want to bring up my other co-host here, Dr. Katie McMillan. Come on down. Katie reached out to me and said, hey, Lori, have you heard this Dr. Gene Kerns speak? And I was like, yes, and he was fantastic. And she said, I just heard him speak, and I think we should bring him to CADCA. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Katie.
Sure. I will be quick because I'm just going to introduce Kim Walsh. Kim Walsh has worked with Renaissance. This is my direct link to Dr. Kerns in hearing the student achievement gap, right? We're always facing this. How do we bridge this? How do we accelerate learning? So I'm going to have Kim introduce Dr. Kerns, but this is the reason why we're here today. So thank you guys for being here, and please take a box lunch on your way out when you go. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Lori. Thank you, Katie. I just really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. The conversation with Dr. Kerns and IASA has been a progressive conversation. We brought Dr. Kerns to IASA a couple of times over the last 2 years, and in particular this last summer, he shared a conversation with the board of directors on this topic. It was so well received that they asked him to come to the state conference and keynote from the main stage, which is where Lori had the opportunity to hear him speak. The response there was also so positive, they asked us to bring it to Level Up, which is where Katie heard him speak. And the conversation has just continued. We've offered a conversation virtually, and we've had some other opportunities as well. But we are thrilled anytime we can have Dr. Kerns come in person to the state and have the opportunity to meet directly with our educator partners, because every time I hear him speak, I learn something new, and I'm confident you will as well. We welcome all of our guests who are live streaming in as well. If you could do me a favor and put your name and district in the chat so that we can send you the follow-up materials, his slides afterwards. I promise you're going to want them, so if you could add your name into the chat, that'd be great. It'll just give us an idea of where to send that. But without further ado, you know, Katie introduced me, but my name is Kim Walsh. I live in Lake Zurich area, and I support districts in the northwest suburbs of the state, and have worked throughout the state over the last 12 years with Renaissance. One of my colleagues, Daisy Becker, is here in the back of the room. She supports like 2/3 of the state as well, and has been in the state for quite a while. And there's another 5 or 6 of us as well that kind of support and have the privilege of working with districts all over. But you didn't come here to hear me speak. You came to hear Dr. Kerns. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce my friend, my colleague, Dr. Gene Kerns. He was an educator, a district administrator. He now serves as the chief academic officer for Renaissance. He's a published author, and he speaks all over the world, and we're just thrilled to have him here as well. So without further ado, Gene.
Not like they set a high bar. He's got me wired up, so I've got my own mic. So not like they set a high bar. Thank you to Lori. Thank you to Katie. Thank you to Lewis for hosting. I'm glad to be here. As Kim said, my role is Chief Academic Officer at Renaissance. What does that mean? That means I spent a lot of my day watching the journals. What's the latest research that's come out? What are the pedagogical shifts that our profession is going through? What's the policy that's coming along? Because often as we make pedagogical shifts, those might also be woven into policy, and we've probably seen no greater example of that lately than the science of reading, where literally the policy we're going to use, or the pedagogy that we're going to use, is codified within the policy. Math's coming, watch that one. So there's a lot really turning in that area. So a lot of reading, a lot of watching the journals, working with our own research team, advising folks inside our company on product development, and then carrying out the messages of what we did. That said, today we're not talking about any product from Renaissance. We're talking about some of the latest pedagogical thought and a resource that we simply just decided to give away that I think jumps right into the space of achievement gaps, when kids are behind. It was very relevant back when we were all talking about pandemic learning loss and all of that type of stuff. But I think all of that can fall under this umbrella of when a kid is not meeting grade level expectations, like what do we do? Like how do we address that? I also know that most of the audience is secondary. You're my people. Most of my background is middle school and high school. I will tell you, we take a lot of gruff, don't we? You know what I mean? The elementary people are like, we've got our centers and we've got our groups, and those high school people, they don't ever mix it up. And I was reading an article the other day, and what it said is, first grade, second grade, kindergarten teachers, the range of abilities in their classroom is so large that they have to do small groups. And I'm thinking, if you think that the range of abilities is large in a first grade classroom, please come to any secondary classroom, okay? In fact, and Kim, if we want to find this later, if anybody's interested, we did an analysis. It's in one of the blogs. It's titled Rethinking NAEP. NAEP came out and talked about the declines. We did an analysis that said, there had been an analysis done that said, if we know what the average NAEP score is, the mean, and then you know what the standard deviation is, you can use those two to talk about what's the range of abilities in the typical classroom, okay? So there was an author who did that, and what we did was to see is, during COVID, did that range expand, okay? Here's what we found. When kids are starting, like in kindergarten and first grade, if you're using a grade level equivalent scale kind of score, you're talking about plus or minus 2, 2.5, maybe 3 years in range. So the average kindergarten teacher's dealing with that kind of range, plus or minus, so 4 or 5 years. It begins to grow, okay? By the time it gets to 5th grade, it's much larger. By the time you get to 6th grade and anything beyond, you're talking about teachers dealing with kids that have a 10-year range in abilities. That's huge. That is absolutely huge. That's why I literally laughed out loud when that article said the first grade teachers were dealing with such a range. I'm like, no, the secondary people are dealing with a range. Not only are we dealing with a range in performance abilities, that's the academic lens. We're also dealing with the social emotional lens of kids who may have been on a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9-year trajectory of not feeling like they can be successful in school. So they show up to us with a whole lot of emotional baggage, with a whole lot of core beliefs that maybe they just are not cut out to be good students. So not only do we have those academic challenges, but we've got some emotional ones that we have to deal with as well. Okay, so we're doing hard work. Here's what I want you to think about. We have some headwinds that are working against us. Now again, I think these winds, the velocity of them picks up as we make our way into the secondary levels. But I think these are headwinds that we have across all of our entire profession, okay? Headwinds that work against us not only in conveying our content, not only if a kid is on grade level to convey what we are being told or what we're being asked to convey, but these same headwinds that make even that basic job hard, make it even harder when a kid has fallen behind somewhere. And kids who are behind are walking all over our secondary buildings, okay? I want to talk about what those headwinds are and talk about how we might go about addressing them. But before I get right to that topic, I want to share with you one of the most interesting keynotes that I ever heard, and a term that I walked away from it. And when I was thinking about this headwind and the challenge we face, I said, that term fits, okay? I heard a keynote done by this guy, Major General John Barry. He led the investigation into the explosion of the Space Shuttle Columbia, okay? We're talking about the one that was flying basically over Texas at the time, burned up on re-entry. You remember that for years, people were finding parts of that one along the way. If you followed the investigation and the story of that, what you know is that particular space shuttle disintegrated on re-entry because there had been damage to the heat shield. Anybody remember how the heat shield was damaged? How?
Insulation broke off on takeoff.
Insulation broke off during takeoff. The fuel booster tanks were surrounded by this thick styrofoam insulation. A part of that insulation broke off. It hit the heat panel as it took off, did damage that no one realized was there. So when that shuttle began re-entry, the heat shield just wasn't going to be sufficient to protect them. Now, here's the thing that we need to know about that. That is the actual cause. That is what caused the problem. But at the end of the full investigation, what Major General Barry said was, that's not the whole story. Yeah, actually a piece of foam broke off. He said, but there was a deeper issue because that wasn't the first time that pieces of foam like that had broken off. It was a fairly regular occurrence. NASA engineers had identified that what could happen, or what did happen, could happen. That it was possible for a piece of that insulation to damage the heat shield or another part of the shuttle so severely that it would create a catastrophic failure. This had been going on for launch after launch after launch, and they had worked on it within their teams, but no one had figured out a relatively easy way to address it. And it had gone on for launch after launch, year after year. Okay? What Major Barry said was the deeper issue that NASA had to deal with was not necessarily this tragic failure that was there, but why had they allowed that exposure to go on? And he offered up a term that actually gets used in a variety of areas, and it's what I want to talk about today. He said, at the core, the real issue that NASA had to deal with then was they had an instance of normalized deviance. Something that should not be acceptable had been such an ongoing problem that over time it became accepted. He said that never should have been accepted. It never should have been tolerable for there to be so much exposure to the shuttle by an issue that they knew was occurring. But because it had been a little bit problematic to solve, they just let it kept on going. And what he said is, over time, this element of deviance had become normalized. It had just become accepted. And he said at the end of it, that was the end of the shuttle program. And he said, and that was a deep internal issue that NASA had to learn from and make sure that they never, ever did again. That said, I think there may be an area in education where we too possibly have an instance of normalized deviance. We're going to get ready to do a poll, so if you got your phone, and for those people that are on remote, I'm going to give you a link to go to. I'm going to pose several questions and ask you to do several things. This is a great way for those of us in the room to also be simultaneously engaging with and being involved with the people that are doing the live feed there. So we're going to, if you do this poll, you put it up, I'll show you the link. If you go to join.nearpod.com, and John, you know, we may not have had the code for them because I couldn't generate the code till I got in the room, so if you'll let them know what the code is. If you go to join.nearpod.com, the code that you need is RH3N7. RH3N7. And then once we use this, you can just kind of put your phone aside, leave it open. There'll be 2 more polls, another little activity that we'll do. This is where you'll go for the whole day. I say whole day, I'm only with you an hour, so it's not going to be that long of a deal. But you get the idea. This is where we're going to keep going back to. So let me pivot over there so you can see what we're going to do on our poll. I have a question for you, and it relates to what is really at the core of what I want to talk with you today. I'd like to know your honest opinion regarding the number of educational standards that we have been given, and I'm talking about all subject areas collectively, all of math, all of science, all of social studies, all of English language arts. Regarding the number of standards that we have been given to cover in the average standard set, do you think that what we've been given is A, doable, B, challenging to do, and I put an extra L in there just to make it fun, 3, impossible to do? Total number of standards that we've been given: doable, challenging, impossible. What's your opinion? Give a couple seconds there before I show the results. It asks for a name. You can put your name if you want to. You could have been Mickey Mouse. It doesn't matter. We're not going to check or take roll or anything like that. But it's just a way for us to kind of see what folks are thinking there. This is one where I think I know how the poll's going to turn out. I think I pretty much know what it's going to look like, but let's see what people have said. So when I pivot over here to teacher view, we'll get an idea of what people are saying. Number one answer, impossible. Everything reflected by green on this graphic is saying, your folks are saying impossible. Still coming in, but right now we have 68% of the room saying, can't do it. No way that can be done. There's only 4% of the people attending say, I think it's doable. 96% of people are saying it is at least challenging, probably impossible. Ladies and gentlemen, that is the normalized deviance I'm talking about, okay? Because for anyone that says that's my intuition about that, I'll show you the research that proves that your intuition is right, okay? There have been numerous conversations that literally go all the way back to the first time, and I'm looking around the room, this always sounds crazy when I say it. Do you remember there was a time when we didn't have standards? That doesn't sound right, does it? But you know what I mean, okay? I'm looking around the room, and many of you, like me, were around when those first standard sets came out. From the very first time those standards sets came out, there were people saying, wait a minute, this is a whole lot. One of my friends and mentors and colleagues is Dr. Rick Stiggins, and he says, you know what happens? He's like, whenever you get a group of people that love their subject area in a room together, and you ask them to write standards, they can't help but put everything in there because that's their stuff. They love it. He's like, it's almost like they can't resist putting it in there. That's what Rick said. Here's some others. And again, the case that I'm trying to build is the number of standards that we have been given. And that's a state level, that's an educational level, but also too, then we decide, we prioritize what we're going to do in our schools. The number of standards often that we try to cover is so broad that it actually becomes normalized deviance there, okay? Multiple authors have written about this. So if you want anybody to say, yeah, I believe it's too much, any one of those citations around down there will do it, okay? Now, those are opinion-based, very informed opinion-based citations. This one was actually a study done by McCrell, the Mid-Continent Research and Education Laboratory. They went in and tried to do an estimate of it. They say, how much time would it take to teach all of these concepts? All of the 4 major content areas that we're given, their analysis came back and said, if you were actually going to do that, it would probably take as much time as typically as we've reserved for people to get a master's degree or a professional degree. Now, last time I checked, you don't get kids for that many hours, okay? You don't get kids for that many years. Do you see the problem we have? We've got all this stuff to cover. This one I like. This is my favorite citation because I think it's the shortest. It gets right to the point. We've been given about 15,000 hours of content to cover with kids, and we get about 9,000 hours of contact time with them. It's impossible. If you take, we use that phrase, unpacking the standards. If you indeed unpack all the standards, what you've got is 15,000 hours of stuff sitting around the room, and your job is to fit that into a 9,000 hour container. Any way we slice and dice that, there's going to be a lot of stuff that's left out, and we've dealt with that, okay? Many districts identify their power standards. There's a group for curriculum achievement partners that supported the Common Core State Standards. So they created their priority standards. Bob Marzano's got his priority content. These were all the ways that everybody has responded to this reality that we've been given more, which again I think is normalized deviance, okay? And it's what I said when I began. This issue of normalized deviance, what it's done is it has contributed to achievement gaps, because sometimes teachers are trying to decide, well, what am I going to cover? What am I going to lead out? Because I can't leave it all out. Sometimes they might have not been covering something that was essential, so that they could try and cover something that was not quite as essential, but they didn't know how to delineate between the two, which means that the overabundance of standards created part of the achievement gap. But then the other thing is, it hobbles us when we try to catch a kid up, because sometimes we try to catch them up on everything, okay? We've got to solve this issue, or we will continue to have some plaguing problems. What I say is no more. We've got to get to a better place and deal with this in a better way. So here's what we at Renaissance decided to give away. It's available to any school. We build custom learning progressions for every state in the country. So we take the state standards of every state, we break them down, we take the standards and break them down into discrete teachable skills. something that become the basis of an individual lesson. So for years, when Stiggins and Dylan William and others have talked about sitting down with teachers and helping them unpack the standards so that they can understand all the parts in it, that is what we have done. We've unpacked the standards so that we know all the discrete teachable pieces in there, and then when we say learning progression, what we mean is we've taken those skills and we've placed them in order. This is ideally teachable order. You should teach this and teach that. And some of this you know intuitively. Like, for example, you got to teach area before, you got to teach geometry. Try that again. You've got to teach multiplication in math before you attempt to cover fully area with kids. You can deal with the concept, but when area becomes a formula, length times width, or some, 1/2 times base times height, you've got to have multiplication skills going on there. So part of this is we create these custom learning progressions, and when I say we, don't just think that it's our company doing the work. We have involved content leaders and content experts from all over the country. So for more than a decade, Dr. Jim Milgram at Stanford, who was the highest ranking mathematician on the Common Core State Standards Writing Committee, he's advised us on math content. For years, Dr. Margaret Heritage at the Crest Center at UCLA, who's considered the world's leading expert on literacy learning progressions and the development of literacy, she's been advising us. Dr. Amanda Vanderheyden is considered one of the leading experts for really, really young children in both numeracy and literacy. She's advising us. You saw the McCarroll study, they've advised us. So we've worked with numerous think tanks, numerous leaders. Karen Hess, excuse me, Karen was at the Center for Assessment in Dover, New Hampshire. Karen's the one that wrote the learning progressions for both PARCC and Smarter Balanced, and she helped us write ours. And what we decided to do is just give ours away. Like, if you want to see what the skills are, they are out there. But here's what we did. As we were writing those learning progressions, because when you think about this, a learning progression says you can't just say what a kid needs to know in 3rd grade. You can unpack standards and find that out. A learning progression does something more than that. Once the 3rd grade standards are unpacked, you look back to 2nd grade to make sure that every prerequisite that was necessary was there. You also then look ahead to 4th grade to make sure that everything you covered in 3rd grade set kids up for success into 4th grade. So this is not just an unpacking of the standards, but it is a back and forth journey of constantly looking up and down the grade levels to make sure that at key points along the journey, the skills that are necessary are covered. So that 3rd graders can conceivably walk into a 4th grade classroom if they've done all the content of the 3rd grade and be well prepared for everything coming at them, no surprises. Okay. When we did that, what we then did was we identified the things that were absolutely essential. Okay. We give them the name focus skills. So you take the standards, you unpack them, you got a bunch of skills. Some of them were flagged by the content experts as being focus skills. They are absolutely non-negotiable. They're the things you just must get. Idea being, if you learn all the focus skills of grade 4, you'll be ready for everything coming you at the grade 5 classroom. If you've learned all the focus skills of grade 7, you'll be ready for grade 8. And I believe at the end of the day, what most teachers would say, particularly secondary ones, is, I don't need kids who necessarily got all accelerated. Like, I just need a kid to come in the door knowing what they're expected to know. If you could just send me kids that are remotely on grade level for grade 9 English or Algebra 1 in the 9th grade, it would change my world. Because I often find that kids come in the classroom with these big, gaping holes in the understanding of primary central ideas that just weren't covered. So, focus skills. This is one of the definitions of them. This comes from the National Foundation for Educational Research. They are partners of ours, a think tank in London, experts on standards there, because we've written progressions for different countries around the world. They defined it this way. Focus skills are skills that are considered to be essential underpinnings or foundations of future learning. Again, what do you need to get out of grade 8 so that you're ready to walk into that grade 9 classroom and be ready? This is what we decided to give away. So what I have for you is a list of the most essential skills for progress in reading and math across all of the grade levels, custom built for and tailored to the Illinois standards. And if you want to compare them to others, you can look at the other states as well. This is something that we decided to give away during COVID because I think about focus skills like this. This is what would happen if you don't teach focus skills. The content area collapses, okay? Many of us have watched HGTV programs. And it doesn't take very long on an HGTV program before they point at a wall and they say, is that, what kind of wall are they going to say? Is that a load-bearing wall? Okay. Because if not, I'm going to rip it out. I'm going to have this big open-ended kind of. Point being, if it's not a load-bearing wall, I can take it out and nothing overly severe is going to happen. But if I try to remove a load-bearing wall, there's going to be a consequence. I liken focus skills to the load-bearing walls and the foundations of a structure. If they're there, the structure is held up, okay? The skills that we did not identify as focus skills, they're like non-load-bearing demising walls. My message to educators is not teach the focus skills and ignore everything else. My message is prioritize the focus skills, do an exceedingly good job with them, and then teach as many of the other skills as possible. And there is enough time to do that. But a lot of teachers are standing in the room with the 15,000 hours of content and the 9,000 hour container and trying to figure out on their own what they're going to cover. Because I'll tell you, when I was middle school and high school administration, no teacher ever walked in my office and said, Dr. Kerns, I finished everything in the textbook, and you know, it's only April, so like, what else do you want me to do with these kids? There's never been a year that anyone ever covered every chapter, every unit in the textbook. We were always prioritizing, but often we were prioritizing just based on our own tuition. What we're trying to bring to this is just more informed alignment and development around content. So let me show you what that looks like for Illinois. I'll show you how to get to these skills, I'll show you how to use them, but let me show you the high-level picture. When we took the Illinois standards for math and unpacked them, the result was 1,114 discrete skills. So from the beginning of school all the way up through Algebra 2, there's 1,114 specific skills that need to be taught to kids. When I map for you focus skills versus just the general skills, 27% of them are identified as focus skills. Now again, here's part of the message. We're not saying to schools, teach the focus skills, don't teach the other things. No, 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 no. There's enough time to teach the focus skills and then cover many of the other ones. But here's the difference between what I'm going to do when I teach a focus skill and what I'm going to do when I teach another skill. My goal with that focus skill is not mere proficiency. My goal is mastery. If you've ever built a house, you want the foundation to be really strong. If you've ever built a house, if you saw some engineering or product flaw in something for a load-bearing wall, you would get your contractor in there and say, we've got to address that. Because when there are flaws in elements like that, the long-term weight-bearing load is just not going to be done. So even though the focus skills might represent, in this case, 27% of the math content for the Illinois standards, you wouldn't merely spend 27% of time on them. You'd spend much more. You might spend 40, 50, 60% of your time because you want that foundation and those load-bearing walls to be very strong. There's enough time to do an exceedingly good job with those essential elements and then go back and weave in and cover as many of the other things as possible. For reading, this is what it looks like. Take the Illinois reading standards, unpack them, 918 skills across all the grade levels. 43% of them are focus skills, okay? And I'll show you the website you can go to. These percentages are very common across the country. In fact, it's almost always 43 or 44% within reading. It's usually pretty close to that 27%. Also, I don't have this, but we'll play the trivia game here. There's no prizes, so don't get too excited. If I were to say to you across all grade levels, what grade level do you think would have the highest number of focus skills for reading? Absolutely essential things that you might need to use. Somebody, it's like Price is Right, place a bid. What grade? I got to vote at third. Very common answer.
First.
Got to vote at first. Fourth. I get a lot of votes at third. Here's why I think that. Because we hear about kids reading on grade level by the end of grade 3. That's what we hear. That's not right. Sorry. First grade. First grade and kindergarten. In almost every state, it's first grade. Whenever it's not first grade, it's kindergarten in that state. And in any other state, it's just the opposite. Here's why. You're learning absolutely essential foundational reading skills that you then rely upon for the rest of your life in terms of reading, okay? Now, in terms of math, what grade level do you think has the highest number of really challenging focus skills? Got it voted, second, 6. This one, there's more variance across the country. So the country is almost in complete agreement of first grade or kindergarten for reading. With math, most commonly across the states what we find is it's Algebra 1 that has the highest number. Now, we can link to these articles too, Kim. There's the articles about that, but there's also one about what we call trip steps. We did an analysis that didn't just say the skills, but what we identified the ones that were the hardest ones. What are the focus skills that are the hardest ones for kids to learn? We call them trip steps because it's like going up a staircase and then finding that the next step is this big. Let me give you an example. One of the trip steps in math is finding the area of a rectangle when provided the length of the sides. That occurs in third grade math curriculum, but think about why it's hard for a third grader. They just learned to multiply that year too. Anything they've ever done with area before was maybe tiles. Now area is length times width, so it becomes a conceptual formula. And the result of the computation is a new unit for them, square inches or square centimeters. That's a lot of cognitive load, okay? So we identified also across the grade level skills that are just disproportionately difficult. Sometimes the next step you have to have a kid take is just a lot harder. When you look at that analysis and you say, well, where's the stuff the hardest? The grade that is actually one of the hardest ones for kids, 7th grade. 7th grade has a tremendous amount of both challenging ELA-based things and challenging mathematics-based kind of things. So Kim, maybe we can put that article in there. I hadn't put that in there, but let me show you to you live. So we're going to go to this website, renaissance.com/focus skills. It's got a dash between the T. This is a free website. It's available to anybody. Your teachers can go there. It will show you all these focus skills for the state. I'll show you where the trip steps are. I'll show you some other stuff that's just kind of there. Here's the deal. Our stated mission as a company is to accelerate learning for all. It didn't just say accelerate learning for our customers. We said all. So when COVID came along, we decided to just give this away because it was like what everybody needed at the time. I've gone to renaissance.com/focus skills. There's some additional information. I'm going to walk you through some of this, but when you get back home, if you want to review, here's a video that gives you a tour, shows you how the thing works. We're going to talk about how it then connects to this pedagogical shift we're going through of more emphasis on accelerated learning. So you don't you need the videos, that's what I'm doing for you today. But when you get home, if you want to review or you want to show them to somebody else, that's where you can go. Scroll down till you get to this section that says focus skills by the numbers. The first time you go there, you'll pick a state. Once you've done it, it'll hold on to it once you get back. So let me go in and choose Illinois. When I do that, it loads up your focus skills, and in the case of your standards, like most, is exactly what I said. In terms of reading, first grade has the most, followed by kindergarten, okay? So this is what it looks like for reading. Couple things I want to point out to you. The domains and headings that you see down the side here, for letter, that's exactly from your state. So when we make that custom fitted learning progression for you, it is designed to fit the structure the state's given to you. Point being, those are the domains for Illinois. If I pivot over to another state that has a substantially different standards list, let's say the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, they have different domains and different headings in their standards, okay? A custom-fitted garment for them will not fit you. So everything down the side is tailored to the state and tailored to your individual standard set. Because the Illinois standard set is a derivative of the Common Core, if you tab around, you'll see these domains are commonly used. It's just derivative of Common Core. Little trivia, in Virginia, if you go there, you're looking at the standards of learning. That's abbreviated SOL. That's not a fortunate acronym if you get the joke. All right, so anyhow, these are the standards. To see the focus skills, what happens is hover over any particular grade that you're interested in, it becomes expanded, and it tells you, for example, that when it comes to English language arts standards around reading, In grade 7, there are 28 focus skills, okay? It becomes expanded. The color coding just carries over, okay? So what you see is a lot of orange, a lot of purple, which makes sense. A lot of reading of informational text, a lot of reading of literature. When we're back over here in the earlier grades, we're seeing a lot of green. That makes sense. There's those foundational skills. There's a lot of them, and then they're done by grade 5, and you move on from there. Also, the most underused resource we have here is found up at the top, where you can click where it says View Domain Tables, because some teachers have really not thought about how their standards are structured. The idea that there are different domains at different grade levels, okay? So it gives you a global view across all the grades of domains and how they build over time. But let me go back to the main part because it's the real meaty thing. Let's say I'm teaching 7th grade English language arts, so it's really helpful as I'm planning my work this year to go in and view those focus skills. So I click the View button. Drills me in one more level. Down the side, what it tells me is these are the domains, and this is how many focus skills appear in each domain. So 4 under Key Ideas and Details of Informational Text, 5 under Craft and Structure, 4 down here, you get the point, okay? For any domain, let's say I'm about to do a unit that relates to the reading of informational text. So I want to look at these orange ones. When I click the plus button, it becomes expanded. And it says, well, here are those 4 focus skills, but there's also some more information here that's really important. Name of the focus skill, more complete description, maybe some details and even examples around that skill. And for anyone that wants to be assured how these skills from Renaissance plug back in to the Illinois standards, here's your standards coding reference. Common Core Standards, English Language Arts and Literacy, Reading Informational Text Standard 7.2. That's how it plugs back in. I guarantee if you look at the skill and you call up that standard, you will see how that skill is a part of that standard. Now, I've shown a lot, so let me pause for a minute and see if there's any questions that you have, or John, anything that folks might have put online. Hands up if you've already seen this or used this some in your district. Hands up if you might plan to use it. I was doing this session in Alabama, and there was a principal, she said, pardon me for like getting on my phone for a minute. She said, but I texted back to our interventionist and said, do you know about this? And if you don't, we need to make sure that when we're serving kids in interventions, we're only doing focus skills. Like if a kid's 2 or 3 years behind, I don't have time to build the demising wall that doesn't hold the whole thing up. I got to make sure this kid has a foundation and the load-bearing wall. So if it's not a focus skill, don't be teaching it in your intervention because we have to catch up kids, okay? So here's a couple questions we get. First of all, one question that people ask a lot is, they might, or actually let me go back to here. They'll say, what does this position thing mean here? 524, 530, 539. Where are the 6 in between here? Okay. First of all, here's what it means. This was reading, so it was 900, I think, and 18 skills when you unpack the Illinois standards. There has to be a skill number 1. That's the first thing you would teach kids, and then you teach the next and the next, and all the way up until the 918th one. That just happens to be the 524th thing you'd want to teach. One after it has to be the 530th thing you'd want to teach. Why do you not see all of the numbers? Because there are 900 and some skills, but not all of them are focus skills. So 525, 26, 27, 28, 29 are either not at all found on this site because they're not focus skills, or it could be that they are over in another domain. Because sometimes we're learning something in one domain, and then, for example, we've learned certain things about geometry, but we've got to go learn multiplication over in number sense before we can come back to geometry and take that next step into area. So position is just, you can think about it as being synonymous with difficulty, and you won't find all the numbers there because this is just focus skills. Okay? So that's what it looks like for reading. Let me show you what it looks like for math. If you go there for math, and again, your profile is the common one of many states, you will see the highest number of focus skills in Algebra 1. You see them graphed there. It's set up exactly the same way. It behaves the same way. But let me give you like a use case that is just like really powerful. Let's suppose I'm teaching 7th grade math, and my pacing guide says up next is a unit on geometry, okay? Well, then a very good use case is for me to go to the 7th grade standards, expand them, drill in, look at the focus skills within the domain of geometry, okay? So when I'm doing my geometry units this year, these are the 4 things I just absolutely want to nail. Like, I want kids to master these things. But let's suppose that as I'm working on them, I find kids are just really struggling. Like, this is just not getting through to them, attempting to do it on grade level. Remember what I said. If you had mastered all the focus skills of grade 6, you would be ready for everything coming at you at grade 7. So what that means is if my 7th graders are struggling with my 7th grade content, chances are the root of their struggle is based on the fact that they probably didn't master the focus skills from 6th grade on that very same domain. So that's why we put this grade level toggle drop down on the side so that I could just go over here, pivot back to grade 6. The color coding of the domain stays the same, so I can look for geometry, or I can just look for purple because that was the color assigned to geometry. I can go back to here and see that these are the 4 skills they needed to have known really well to be ready for what we were going to do at grade 7. Make sense? Also, too, for those of us at a certain age, it's one thing to have a website you can click around, but if I can't print it out and like run a highlighter over it, sometimes it's just not real enough yet, okay? So whatever you have selected on the right, if you go up just a little bit, there is a print button. So we have 6th grade skills. If I hit print, I'm going to get a PDF of all the 6th grade skills, okay? You can do it grade by grade, or if you are an instructional specialist where you deal with all grade levels, you can print out all reading focus skills from preschool all the way through 12. Whatever I've selected on the right will be generated when I hit the print button on the left. Okay? So, I've talked a lot. I feel like it's time for you all to talk just a little bit here. So we're going to go back to Nearpod. I'm skipping the next question because I actually gave the answer away. Do you all remember this one? All the standards, add them up, takes as much long as we normally give to a what? Master's degree or higher, okay? But that'll get us to the next question here, an opportunity for us to hear from some of those folks remotely on there. I would like you to go here. It's called a collaboration board. You just click in the little box down the bottom and enter a response. What I'd like to hear from you and the folks who are remotely with us here today is, what is one new idea, resource, term, factoid, piece of information? What is some new something that you're going to walk out of here with when I'm done that you didn't have when we started with? Okay, so something that's new for you. It could even be a question that you have. That's fine too. So quick responses. What's one new thing? New idea, resource, insight, something you're taking away from there. Someone says this is going to give our Tier 2 MTSS programming focus. Amen. Why are we not using these focus skills for I see a MTSS theme is emerging here. Exactly. Structure and alignment of focus skills. The thought of, yeah, that normalized deviance term, that was one where I went, God, what an interesting concept. And what a powerful insight to say it is a horrible thing for us to allow something that should have been viewed as deviant to become accepted. And that's what we've done. Better focus interventions, only focus the interventions on this. Look at during articulation of our, cross the grade levels there. How do the focus skills align to ACT or SAT? We have test alignment. Content alignment is something else. We are primarily aligning to your state standards. To the extent that your state standards are aligned to ACT and SAT, we're doing that. But we're starting with the state standards because that's your primary driver in there. Skills organized with the research behind them. Yes, yes, yes. Let me scroll down just a little bit, see what we can see more of. I like that when Jackie says that 15,000 hours of content in the 9,000 hour container. It doesn't get any more clear about what the problem is than that. We know it's not going to fit. But we're trying to send kids out into the world, and what we've got to decide is what's the 9,000 hours we can put in that will give them the greatest benefit when they leave our doors. That's what we're dealing with. There was a question there, is there a Renaissance tool that diagnoses and addresses these focus skills? That's from Liz. We do embed this in many of our products. So in reporting and our assessments, these are flagged so that they are prioritized. And our practice programs, we prioritize them or create ways for them to function and just target them. But if you want to follow up, that's a piece to follow up with my colleagues, because I'm trying to stay on just the research here. But yeah, we try to use that to guide what we do, and we prioritize stuff that way. Thinking about what focus skills from reading and math are most commonly found: 8th grade science, 9th grade biology. So clear, focus skills are only reading and math for what we're showing. We could also do an alignment and say what math skills might be lacking that's causing our kids to have some problems in some other content areas. That's what's going on there. Helpful to align and support our students with interventions that are strategic. Absolutely, you're going in the direction. So I want to make a couple more connections before we get ready to wrap up. Again, I said this before, our mission is to accelerate learning for all. That's why we decided to just give this away. Over 100,000 teachers a year visit that website and use those. We constantly update them. So if the state makes new standards, we update those. So last year, 10 states released some new version of standards. These things get updated every summer. So in August, typically, somewhere around August 1, if a state goes through a revision to their standards, we update all this as well. I have it here, our mission, but that's another way of saying our mission in Spanish, okay? If you scroll down just below that section that we were looking at where it said focus skills by the number, right underneath there you will see focus skills in Spanish. And there were some interesting conversations about biliteracy, okay? What's interesting is you can lay those learning progressions side by side. I can tell you, for example, there are 52 essential skills in Spanish that don't even show up in English. And I don't remember the number right off the top of my head, but there are essential skills about reading English that don't show up in Spanish. If you're going to support people in teaching biliteracy, they've got to know the difference. They've got to know, for example, what is it that conceptually just doesn't even exist in English that you're trying to speak or tell to a Spanish speaker, or vice versa. So we have that information. We have more coming where we're going to surface those a bit more, but you will find the focus skills for Spanish right there as well. Progression there only for reading, because that's where we struggle the most. Math, things line up pretty well. It's just a translation issue there, but there is that Spanish reading learning progression, because again, things like accent, gender around nouns, the agreement rules there, unique to Spanish. We don't do those things in English, and vice versa. They don't do letter blends or long or short vowels, okay? What I want you to see is it's a perfect complement for this pedagogical shift that we've been asked to make, which is to get more towards accelerated learning. Now there's this report, in fact the title of this report has almost become a mantra if you've not seen it. Accelerate, don't remediate. When a kid's behind, the challenge we're given is accelerate them, don't remediate them. When someone says remediation, I think about, we say, I'm just going to go back and find where the kid is, and I'm going to work to move them ahead from there. And that's kind of the mindset that we all were taught in an undergraduate kind of approach, or in our teacher training programs. But there's a body of research that says there's a better way to do this. Okay, so let me walk you through what it is. And actually it does bring us to the next poll, which is, before I talk about accelerated learning, let me see what you already know about it. So let me get that poll up there for you. So the question is, if I say accelerated learning, is that something that you say, I'm not too familiar with that? Or would you say, I am somewhat familiar with that? Or would you go so far as to say you feel like you're very familiar with that pedagogical approach? So, not too familiar, somewhat familiar, very familiar. Give you a couple seconds there before I show the results. Got the green representation up at the top, that teal color, about 50% saying, I'm somewhat familiar with that. Another 10, 11% saying very familiar. 15%, something like that, saying not too familiar with that. I want to share with you, first of all, an overview of what it is, but what I think is the most important infographic related to education and pedagogy that has come out in the last several years, and that is one that we're going to give you links to at the end from Education Week. So a little bit of context. This was an article written about it that says, There's new research that says how we need to go about dealing with unfinished learning. It's not remediation, again, referencing that report. Accelerated learning, just so we don't get confused, I capital the A and the L, because to me that means proper noun. I'm talking about something specific. I'm not talking about our older approaches of just acceleration where we're talking about kids who are on or ahead of grade level. And this is something else. Nobody with a marketing degree was involved in naming this, because someone would have said, wait a minute, you already have stuff out there called acceleration. They're going to confuse with it, and acceleration means go faster. Are you really telling them to go faster with kids that are already... You get the idea, but it's what it's called, capital A, capital M. A variety of strategies. I call it an umbrella term. There's many things that can be under the umbrella. The most important thing is this bullet right down here. The most common element, the thing that should cross through any strategy that purports to be accelerated learning, is a desire to expose kids to as much grade level content as possible. Not that we don't expose them to anything else, but we give them as much grade level content as possible. I'll give you a link to this one at the end. It's a graphic done by Education Week's editors. They say, hey, we just graphed the information that's out there. It is phenomenal because it walks through the flow about how a teacher would do this work. Okay, so I know that's small. We're going to zoom in and take a look at it. Don't worry about the top. This is what you do over the summer. This is what your reading teams, your math teams, your content teams do over the summer. They identify the most important work at each grade level, and they think really hard about what the prerequisites are. We've been talking about those things. What really matters, and what's the sequencing of them, and what's the prerequisite order to them. Here's what a teacher does every day. So for a teacher to implement this, here's what it says. As you begin your grade level unit. So if I'm teaching 7th grade math, and my pacing guide says, like I said before, we're going to do a unit on geometry. I'm going to do my unit on geometry. Okay? As you begin your grade level unit, think to yourself and determine what the key skills are and the key pieces of understanding the kids need to have. Sounds like focus skills to me. I could look those up and I could see what the focus skills were for geometry. But then here's what it says. And don't just think about those things, but think about what the prerequisites were to them. Oh. That would be the focus skills on that domain, but from the previous grade level. And then what it says is, and when you've identified what those prerequisites are, don't just think about them, but check on them, because you go to step number 2. Create a little quiz or activity to check and see whether those prerequisites are there. There's a formative pre-assessment. If you check on them and they're there, great, move on with the grade level unit. But if you check on them and they're not there, then you're going to review these things with students. Look at the phrase that's in here. This is really important. Look at where it says you're going to be providing just-in-time support. I've seen just-in-time instruction, just-in-time support, just-in-time review, just-in-time intervention. The idea is right in the moment when a kid needs some beefing up on some skill to do the current grade level unit, then I come in and I work on that skill. We're going to do some just-in-time support. If we had to review those things with kids, then we need step 5, which is another little quiz or activity to determine or gauge whether or not our review was successful. And then basically what step 6 says is just repeat this with each subsequent unit. Oh, you're done with the geometry unit, now here comes the stats unit. What are the most important outcomes you need to achieve during this unit? What are the prerequisites the kids need to have to do this unit as we begin it? Check and see if they are there. If they're not, review them right in the moment just before you're doing or as you are doing this unit. And if you had to review, make sure you check to make sure your review was successful and you backfill those types of things. Here's what I think is so different about this approach. When we said remediation, sometimes what we would say is, well, I'm not going to worry about the grade level stuff because the kid's not there. I'm just going to go back and find them where they are and work to move them ahead from there. When we said that, what we took out of our perspective, out of our windshield, if you will, was a focus on the grade level standards. We let go of it. We just kind of let it drift away. And here's the problem we bumped into. When we went back and remediated, we might have worked with kids for 2 or 3 months to move them ahead. And we indeed did move them ahead 2 or 3 months. But as we were spending those 2 or 3 months to move them ahead, the expectations also rose 2 or 3 months, which means at the end of our intervention, the kids were really no closer than they were. I think that's where that name acceleration comes from. It implies there must be a way that we have to do this faster, where we have to cover more distance with kids who are behind. And I think this idea of like making sure that everything we're doing is lining to get kids back up to the grade level content that never leaves our perspective, I think that's the fundamental difference that stands between accelerated learning and more previous remediation-based approaches there. So that infographic, I'll give you the link. Here's a nice summary. Hill and Lake. Teach kids ideas and skills that are intellectually demanding for their age and for their grade level. Expect that they will have missed something along the way. This is just going to happen, and part of it is created by the fact that we've been given too much to cover. Expect that they will have missed something, and so identify these gaps as they appear in the course of our grade level or age-appropriate instruction, and then work to go back in and fill these things on an as-needed basis. Focus instruction on the absolute top priority things. And this is one about the review piece. Avoid assigning any child work that is primarily remedial in instruction where they are separated from grade level focus and only are focusing on lower level kinds of things. There's another report that was done by the New Teacher Project called the Opportunity Myth. What it talked about is many kids who are behind never even get a chance to see or work with grade level content. What they found is when you start bridging these things, kids do move faster along the way. So, an important question. Does accelerated learning, does its emphasis on grade level content suggest to us that we should never cover off grade level topics? No, not at all. But here's the message we must carry back to teachers. Accelerate learning says expose kids to as much grade level content as possible. As possible implies it might not always be possible to do just that. You can review off-grade level topics and content and work, but there's two rules about that. Basically what it says is, so it doesn't say that you can't do off-grade level content. There are just these rules about how and when we do it, and basically it's this. These are the two criteria. Is it absolutely essential? So don't go back and do anything that's superfluous or extra, which makes sense. Is it absolutely essential, and is it related to the current grade level unit? So if I'm teaching that 7th grade math class on a unit on geometry, it's fair game for me to review anything related to geometry that any kid needs in the room to be successful with the grade level content. It is not appropriate for me to review anything that isn't absolutely essential, and I should not be reviewing anything that isn't related to the current unit. Okay? So those are the two rules. Is it essential? Does it relate to the current grade level unit? Here's some authors saying it in a similar way. Although acceleration model does revisit some basic skills, these skills are laser selected. They are applied right away in the context of new learning, and those skills are never taught in isolation. Now, so far, what we've said is, this is what I'm going to do in the classroom. What if we have a kid that's getting Tier 2 or Tier 3 services at MTSS, and they have more than one teacher that's working on math or reading with them? They're in the core classroom some of the time, and then they're going down the hall and they're seeing the interventionist. So the last point I want to talk about is, well, first of all, why accelerated learning? And then we'll talk about the intervention piece. Why accelerated learning? Some of the first studies on this were based on post-Katrina analysis of schools that were just literally decimated by that. Researchers went in and they were looking at the academic impacts, and what they found is some schools, their kids didn't suffer nearly as much. When they got into it, what they found was the schools where the kids were less impacted were schools that said, yeah, a hurricane happened, but we still got to do grade level work. Like we're gonna do everything we can to just keep pushing the kids with that. The schools where the kids suffered the most were the schools that said, oh, we've been through all this, there's no way we can be doing grade level unit, we're just gonna go back and do a lot of review and we'll just move them ahead as much as we can, okay? So these were some of the first studies there. What they found, this was a study from the New Teacher Project, they found that schools that use accelerated learning approaches, in those schools, two major outcomes. One, kids struggle less, learn more. Well, I want that. Like, give me a double helping of that, okay? Students struggle less and learn more, but they also found that there were some pretty powerful equity implications. They found that students of color and those from low-income backgrounds, they are more likely than their white, wealthier peers to experience remediation even when they had already shown or demonstrated their ability on grade level content. So they found there was just a lot going on there. Kids are learning less, are struggling less, learning more. Implications for intervention. Here's some of the guidance. Here's what it says. If you got a math tutor, tutors shouldn't simply just reteach. The tutors need to know what's going on in the current grade level classroom. The same rules apply. So when we said only review it if it's absolutely essential, only review it if it's related to the current grade level unit, that's what that means is our tier 3, our tier 2, our interventionist people who are giving kids extra time, they need to know what the current grade level units are. Think about what that might mean for a kid. A kid who's been struggling and doesn't feel like it all makes sense. Think about what happens if they go down the hall to one teacher and they're working on something, and then they come back into the main classroom and they go, wait a minute, we were just talking about that. Okay, I get that. This is beginning to fit together. For some kids, that might be the first time that they're going, you know what, I might actually be able to make sense of all of this. But it's only going to happen if our interventionists aren't reteaching previous year's lessons. The tutors need to know what's being taught in the regular class that week and give students the extra practice on those topics or review the prerequisites so that they can be successful with that on-grade level work. So yeah, even though it's intervention, we pull them out, we send them somewhere else and someone else is working, we're all shooting back to the same kind of stuff. Here's another code for you. I'll show this to you in just a minute. You don't need to go there now. Just write down the code, join.nearpod.com, and the code CV76F, because there I've placed all of my slides, a link to several blogs that we've done, a link to that Education Week graphic about accelerated learning, and some more things there. So basically every tool, every resource that I've talked about is available there. Grab that code. I'll show it to you really quick, and we'll get ready to get ourselves wrapped up. So let me show you that resource really quickly, because there is one thing you need to know about it. Let me get that code myself. I didn't open this up yet, so you'll see live and in person the way it goes. Let me open up my browser here, join.nearpod.com, enter the code. You'll see the same title slide you saw before. But when you click to the next page, what you'll get is to a collaboration board that I've used to put everything on. So each tile has a hyperlink you can't click on. You have to copy it and just drop it in another browser. But here's a link to the Education Week graphic. This one will take you right to the Focus Skills Resource Center. Here's an article in Ed Week about accelerated learning. Here's a great one that gives 3 examples. What would it look like in an early grades reading classroom? What would it look like in a high school math classroom? And what would it look like with an English language learner struggling in late middle grades? So some great examples there, several studies. This is a link to that Accelerate, Don't Remediate study. Again, you just have to copy the hyperlink here. So I can't make them like they click and open, but if you just go in and say, I want to read this study or this paper where it's giving some examples, I can just go here and highlight that hyperlink, copy it, open another window and paste it in, and I'll go right to that article. Oh, I didn't copy the whole thing because it's underneath the browser there, but you get the idea. Let's try this one, where I can see it. There you go. So those are all the links. Those are all the resources. Up at the top, what it says is a copy of the slides are available by clicking on this blue Adobe icon on the side. You click there, it'll bring up all the slides that I've used today. The only thing to note is I have to put an expiration date on this. I can't leave it open forever. So this website is available to you until the last day of June. So long as you go there by then, you can grab all these things and get them and download them by then. So get it before then, because July 1 it'll be gone. Let me get ready to wrap up. One last idea, and we're done. That is this. This is from Doug Lemoff's book. Doug's the guy that wrote Teach Like a Champion. He's got another great book called Practice Perfect. Subtitle, 42 Rules About Getting Better at Getting Better. What he's saying is 42 different things that teachers could think about as they decide what to practice with kids. Like, what am I going to work on? How many times am I going to do it? How am I going to structure that? One of the things he talks about is the 80-20 rule. Okay? You see this in professional literature sometimes. It's also known as the Pareto principle or Pareto's law. He was an Italian economist who said, it turns out again and again at life that 80% of the success that we have is based on 20% of what we learned. That within each domain, there's just like a core. There's like the foundation of it. There's the basis. There's the emphasis. If you learn the core of it, then you can go to 80% performance in that field. Everything else, all of the other stuff, all the extra, that takes you from 80% to 100% in that field. But the point is, there is a core that when you get it, just really supports you in getting a lot of the work done. And so what Lemhoff says is, that's what we need to figure out as teachers. What's the 20% of what we teach that gets the 80% generative power? Now, our focus skills would say it's actually 27% in math more precisely. It's 43% in reading, but it's that same idea, finding out what matters the most. Doug says this is a pattern that holds true again and again, that 80% of the results come from 20% of the knowledge and skills that we acquired within a given domain. But here's what he says. When you are practicing these most important skills, one of the ones that's going to drive most of the growth and drive most of the performance, do not stop when your participants know simply how to do it, because your goal with these skills must be excellence, not just mere proficiency. Build the strong foundation that is unquestionably well built. Build the strong load-bearing walls, and then finish them out as much as you can, but start by building the foundations and the load-bearing walls first. Said perhaps more succinctly by Doug, our goal as teachers is to help our students be great at the most important things. And hopefully some of this conversation today helped you understand what those things are and how we might build the experiences for kids to get them there. With that, I thank you. So, go for it.
I think we have some time built in, kind of a little workshop session with Gene, so if you have specific questions or application questions, or want to pick his brain on any of his background related to any of this information, or feel free to raise your hand. We got this time set aside for you. I also wanted to mention before we do that, just that all this information and bringing Gene to Illinois is built around his thought leadership around these concepts, and that's our goal, is just to really help you take this information and apply it into your own systems at your school. If you have questions about how it kind of folds into and how we can help support that, feel free to reach out. My contact information is on the email from Katie and Lori as well, and I can get you to the right person if it's not me that works with your district, and happy to have that conversation as well. For those on the live stream, I've been putting all the links in the chat along the way. You can also get the Nearpod, but if you have any questions or you had trouble hearing something or you missed something, my email's in there as well, so you can reach out and I can, again, get the information to you. But with that, I will turn over for questions and workshop time with Gene.
Yeah, this is the optional bit. So any questions, comments? This is the audience participation part. Go for it. Yes, sir.
I wrote the comment about the 8th and 9th grade science classes.
Yeah.
How have you seen schools or programs translate the reading and math skills into synthesis courses?
Yeah, I can't say that I've seen a ton of examples. Usually the work has been focused on the reading and math. I have seen some schools do what I said, which was, okay, let us acknowledge that a lot of what we're doing in science is driven by the math. Let's cross-reference the units that we have with the focus skills for mathematics, and then kind of do some of the same work of targeting those skills, checking on them in the units that we're doing, reviewing them, and using that accelerated learning approach. We do have, it's not out there totally available, but we did do a learning progression based on the next generation science standards. So we do have that. I don't even know where that form is. I mean, that had a lot of momentum for a while, then it kind of died. Everybody's like, when are you going to do social studies? When social studies is not as political as it is right now, because you can't even get 3 teachers from the same school to agree what you're going to teach at a grade level, let alone write a progression for it. So we've begun initial work in science. I think we'll initially get back to that and then start making it more available, building some tools and assessments that align with it, but it's only the first steps have been done there. Yeah, the Spanish piece though, there's a lot going there with a lot more coming. Yes, ma'am.
I know you said the goal obviously is to maximize like grade level content, and you were using the term like interventionist. So in a typical high school setting, does the Renaissance program get used more in intervention spaces? So like identifying your power learning targets and then in that capacity? Or
It could. It depends upon the school. And we've got different programs. So we've got assessment tools that will report on this. And when it says instructional planning, here's the skills, focus skills are identified, and you can hyperlink from the skill to resources to teach that skill. That's all within the assessment world. And then we use this to prioritize our content development for our practice pieces. So for example, we have a math program called Freckle where you can put it in focus skills only mode, where the teacher is saying to the program, don't review anything that isn't this focus skill there. Sometimes that's something that a school is using every day for their purposes, but it has enough flexibility that it also becomes part of their intervention as well. I know I've done several, Janice Pavlonis in Carbondale here in Illinois. That's a district where everything they do in their day team meetings is driven by focus skills. And she's done a number of webinars with me about like their approach, which basically is just like, we're going to focus our time just on these things. And the other stuff teachers can deal with, but I had one principal say, I'm only going to go into a data team meeting, we're only going to talk focus skills because we barely have enough time anyway. I've got to make sure that every conversation we have is absolutely on point. Okay.
So our district is integrated math.
Yes.
And I see with the skills are certainly
Yeah.
focused on the one out
Yeah.
in the country. So is there a recommendation in how to?
You know, there's some older documents I'm able to get. We did not put up on the website. When we built the first progressions, we built both separated courses and integrated math. What we found was outside of Delaware and one other state that mandated it, there were those states and a couple of schools, but the total amount of user, activity around those integrated progressions was really, really little. So they kind of fell to the wayside. They're out there on paper somewhere, but they're not up and in the site. So we have it. I just wouldn't know how to surface it for you. Other questions? Can I ask what resonated? I mean, what hit some kind of a chord for you? Go for it.
I think it reinforces some of the conversations we're having internally. Just we talk about pre-teaching skills, getting away from we use STAR for diagnostics, but it is so granular, and we're not especially for reading, we're not seeing huge deficits from most students that are struggling. It's more the contextual piece, putting larger pictures together.
Yeah.
So we're trying to get to that pre-teaching of skills and anticipating reading deficiencies in social studies and science and make it more full. So here, like you said, here's what you're going to see, so that you're more comfortable with it when you get there.
Let me show you something cool here too. I don't know. Hands up if any of you use Nearpod in your districts. Because there's a free version of Nearpod which just limits like how many assignments you can have out. Watch something that you can do that I don't always show because not every state can do it. So let's say you're teaching this unit and you're trying to work on this focus skill. Why is it doing that to me? Come on, scroll down. I'll go down another grade level. For you, because you're in a Common Core derivative state, if you highlight these skills, the standards coding reference here, if you copy it and you go back here and you just paste it in up here where it says search by topic, that's all you have to do to then find Nearpod lessons aligned to that standard and that skill. Okay? There's a drill down over there, filter by standards, where if you're in Alabama, you say, well, choose Alabama, science, you can drill down manually. But the standards coding reference that is in the Focus Skills Research Center for all Common Core states, if you just copy that, paste it in up at the top in Nearpod, bam, it's going to bounce back with Nearpod lessons that align to that. Again, I don't show it in Alabama because it doesn't work there, but it works for you.
I was going to share a talk where right before COVID hit, January, we did focus skills. We decided what was essential. So I'm excited to see what my teachers have chosen for the last 4 years to be essential.
Yeah.
What we have focused on and how much they are in line with the focus skills here. But then also number 2, you mentioned about the interventions. We have something called Math Plus, which is tier 2, and it's like in-time learning. It's based on a very specific skill, what's being taught in the class, essentially. And when kids are not getting it, it is amazing when kids come into my class and they're like, oh, we were just doing this, and like,
Yeah.
the confidence they have now because it is on grade level.
Yeah, they feel like the parts are coming together. Okay, suddenly this is making sense instead of us shotgunning content all over the place of unrelated topics.
And they hate it when we pre-teach or we pre-teach something that's an old skill.
Mm-hmm.
It's not what they've seen yet or know we're doing yet,
Yeah.
because we really don't like that. But it really does help them.
So, sometimes people say focus skills, is that the same as our power standards or the state power standards or Marzano's content, critical concepts or something? Here's what I say, same concept. Is it going to match 100%? No, because these are different groups doing the work. Will they more than likely overlap 90% or more? Yeah. In fact, Doug in his book, when he did that 80-20 rule, he said, if you don't have formal guidance, get a group of informed people around the table and let them take a shot at it. They're going to get real close. But I went in and did a presentation like this in one district, and the lead administrator came up to me at the end of the session. He said, you just saved us like 3 days of work. He's like, we were about to do that. He's like, now, instead of us trying to identify the skills, now we can use the 2 days to go find the resources to support the teaching of the skills. He's like, so we just catapulted ahead. This was going to be our first step, and in a semester we were going to do resources. Now we can do resources tomorrow.
I was just going to say back to the science question, because obviously I brought my science guy too. I do think there's something like when you were saying like cross-referencing the math, because obviously you talked about that opportunity gap when students weren't even allowed to be exposed to challenging content, right? So we're all working hard to get science, all students into chemistry, right? And so to see the math standards, right? Because that's what I feel like we hear from chemistry teachers, like they can't do the balancing piece. And so if you could have the math teachers, which are really aligned, work with the chemistry teachers to really be crystal clear on what are those standards that would really accelerate students in chemistry, right? That feels like it's a place that it would overlap. And then even talking about social studies, right? We know that is one of
The reading of informational text
absolutely
is social studies.
And so if the teachers knew, like, help us, because I'm a forever social studies teacher, right? And I didn't get a lot of coursework on how you teach reading. So if you can enumerate that and help them get better at it,
And I think there's even a potential, what I've seen is, let's not underestimate what the chemistry teacher might be willing to do if you narrow the focus.
absolutely.
Because I had social district people in my district that if I really narrowed the focus and said, this is what the kids need and here's a resource, like, I can do that. When you say you got to reteach math to these kids to do chemistry, they're going to be like, no, that's not going to happen. But if we can narrow it right down to here's a handful of skills that if you could review would be super helpful, they're a lot more willing to do that.
It's powerful if you can get the chemistry team with the IM2 team and have an honest discussion of what we're seeing in chem that they can't do.
Yeah.
And we can help each other.
I also,
Same thing in physics and IM3.
Of course.
yeah, I also wonder too, we're having a lot of conversation in our district about unifying language, that if I go in one math teacher's classroom, they call it X, and it's really, I'm doing the same thing in chemistry and they're calling it something totally different, but don't reference that, right? Like there's a gap when I might be able to do it. So having, looking at standards in this way where it's unifying,
Yeah,
that
could be.
also, just that small lever might flick some switches to help more kids.
John, are the folks doing okay remotely? Were any questions that came in there? I didn't want to forget that they're there as well. Doing okay. Doing okay. Others? Go for it.
We just met with our feeder schools, and this is just giving me some ideas to have potential vertical team conversation. Great.
Let me point out something. I didn't mean to cut you off, but yeah, go ahead if you want. That domain table thing that I showed, that's a really important piece because sometimes the domains change when you cross across the feeder schools. So you've got, I'll just use a math example. You got math content under Common Core that's organized under numbers and operations in base 10, running grades 1 through 5, and numbers and operations or with fractions and decimals running grades 3 through 5. I don't remember the color, but let's pretend it's orange up there. When you cross over into the middle school, all of that gets collapsed into a domain called number sense. So your middle school teachers are looking for number sense. Your elementary school teachers are talking about numbers and operations in base 10. That graphic up there, because it does the coloring, shows them how these domains come and go and how one domain in elementary school then feeds into another domain. So I bring that up because sixth grade teachers sometimes when they say, I want to look for my current unit, I want to go back to fifth grade, they get thrown off because when they go back, the domains are different. So I tell them it's the same color. Like if you were teaching orange, look for orange. But I'm sorry, I might have cut you off.
I think that this is a really neutral, disarming way to have a conversation, because I think one of the fears would be to say to our teacher school, middle school, what, you know, we don't want to come off like, what the hell are you guys doing
No,
there?
no.
So, it allows us to have like a kind of neutral conversation about some of these things in terms of, I think, specifically reading information text.
Well, and think about the name, focus skills. We just want to narrow our focus. Like let's just boil it right down to what we need to be looking at, what we need to be controlled at. So here's that domain table thing I was talking about here. Why is that one not coming up? There it is. Okay, so here's the math one for Illinois. So like counting and cardinality, that's a domain for your K and pre-K teachers. It then goes away. Like a lot of teachers don't realize in math, do you know the only domain that goes basically across all the grade levels? You may know? Geometry. Geometry. Until you get to Algebra 1 and 2 in geometry, but across all the previous grade levels. But here's the numbers and operations, expressions and equations. Here's numbers and operations in base 10 being augmented with fractions and decimals, all then flowing into the number system down there. But sometimes for some teachers, you put this up and they go, I didn't realize how the standards were built. I didn't realize how the things went across the grade levels there. So that's the reason I brought this up is a lot of people never go there, but it's actually got some really cool information that helps people get perhaps a more global view on the way the standards are constructed than they may normally have had. Others? Go for it.
I really love the fact that you focused on mastery rather than proficiency. Because I think that is always a huge conversation within teams around what should it be.
Yeah.
And if you're looking at a 5-point scale or a 4-point scale, when you're looking at evidence-based proficiency, and what should it be set at? You know, if it's a 5-point scale and 4 is proficiency, well then what is 5? Is 5 extension? No, 5 is mastery. That's what it should be.
Yeah.
If you don't have it, your house will crumble, just like you were saying.
And I think that delineation is really important because sometimes we don't get the nuance of those words. Proficiency means good enough. Good enough for now, implying that there's more parts to the journey. Mastery means you got it. Forwards, backwards, wake you up in the middle of the night, ask you about it, you've got it. And we have to help our teachers delineate between, with these skills, my goal must be with mastery. With these other skills, exposure and proficiency, that's fine. But I've got to know the difference between those two things. Am I putting down the foundation and putting up the load-bearing wall, or am I adding anything else to the structure? Anybody else? Yes, sir.
Just because we just wrapped up IAR, testing's really on my mind. So I got to ask the question kind of how this focus on the focus skills translates over into
performance.
Are we getting the coverage that we need to see our students rating exceed standards on a state test?
Yeah.
And how do we have that conversation?
Two things I will offer. One, I cannot speak to the construct of the Illinois test because I haven't been in that one for a while. Many of the states, though, do have some prioritization within their standards, and so you will often find, for example, Texas actually has done a version of this where they say, here are the skills that we're shooting for mastery on. And when they build a state test, they write that in, okay? Here's the other thing that I think holds out the most hope for us is, look at the PISA results internationally in mathematics. Every industrialized nation in the world that outperforms us in mathematics does so by teaching half as many math topics, but they teach them to a level of deep understanding. So like we've been obsessed with like adding all the topics in. They're like, no. Teach half as many things, but make sure your kids really learn them. And so I think that's a really important lesson for us. You know, less is more. We've just really struggled to pare the list down to less. And they're outperforming us by having learned that message.
The kids might surprise us. If they really truly understood it, they might be able to like make some conclusions on tests that they haven't seen that question before.
And I think this, I mean, you've gotten a really rich theme here. Let's delineate between what needs to be the mastery piece. So for example, early grades reading, we recently acquired a tool that assesses the early grades foundational skills. And there's a handful of skills. And when I present on it, I say every kid, every skill to the mastery level. Like, these are the foundational reading skills. You either have them or you don't have them. And if you don't have them, there's going to be bad consequence. Here's what that turns into. We're doing a webinar. We're talking about this program and these skills that are going to be assessed. And a teacher poses to the product developer, says, has this assessment ever been normed? When will it be normed? And the creator of the assessment came back and said, it has not been normed and it will never be normed. Because norming it implies it's okay for some kid to maybe be above or below. These are skills that are essential for mastery in reading. Like, if a kid doesn't learn these skills in the first couple of years of school, there's going to be a bad progression forward. It's the same kind of thing with like number sense in math. Why would we ever expect a kid would do well in algebra if they've not closed out number sense to a level of automaticity and fluency? And so it's helping us get to that conversation of where are the things that we do have to have that absolute, total, effortless recall, mastery, automation, whatever you want to call it. Where is it that we need to strive for that as our outcome? Yes, ma'am.
So you talked about if a kid is behind grade level, to go back to the previous grade, look at those focus.
And you might have to go back too if they're really behind. Yeah.
I mean, we're looking at kids that are, in geometry and they're at a 4th grade math level.
Yep.
Do you keep going?
You do.
All the way back?
Yeah. And I think what the whole hope is, if we can start like early in the system, again, remember what I started out with this? There are headwinds that are working against us. Because we were given too many things to cover, one, it created part of our achievement gaps, because in the earlier grades, they might have been rushing to cover everything when you would have said, just give them to me knowing the basics. And then two, we're hobbled in addressing it when they fall behind, because without some guidance, we try to go back and fix everything. I think if we can start fixing those problems earlier, accelerating learning when necessary earlier, yeah, and again, that's why I laughed at that article. You're like, you're telling me like ranges of abilities? Come to my high school classroom. I'll show you a range of abilities. Yeah. But it is. We might have to go back several grade levels in finding it. But again, it also still becomes only the most essential skills, only those related to the current grade level unit. As much grade level content as possible. With some kids, less grade level content will be possible, but let's just strive for as much as we can.
I've seen you speak before, and so this might not be a fair question without having your presentations in front of you, but it was post-pandemic and the learning curves and how the pandemic impacted the curves.
Yeah.
Is there a general description you might be able to offer?
Yeah, we still have our data ongoing at renaissance.com/performing. What we saw, everybody saw, was math more impacted than reading. Math was probably down 8, 10, 15 percentile points. But math's always also rebounded more than reading has. So there's no magic to it. I mean, it's almost like that conversation has faded to some degree. People are less interested in that COVID-related kind of thing, but there are still some lingering impacts. The older the kids are, the more of those impacts are there, because they were dealing with more advanced content. Like I said, 7th grade, if you look at the focus skills of 7th grade, and there's a link to the TRIP steps, remember, that's a list right underneath there too. That's the hardest skills in reading and math. There are a lot of really complex, both reading and math skills, all converging at grade 7. Academically, it is one of the, that research brought an absolute new understanding that academically grade 7 is one of the hardest years on a scale that we may not have even ever considered before. And then you think too, my God, we've created one of the hardest academic years for kids when they were the middle of like everything that 7th graders in the middle of. That might not have been the wisest kind of thing. What can we do to address part of that? Yeah. Yes.
I don't really have a comment on this topic other than I've really enjoyed hearing about it and it's got my gears moving. But I certainly wanted to thank you and the team for coming in and sharing this. It's
Pleasure.
something that our team hadn't seen before, and we already have plans of how we can share it with the district. So
That's all we want. That's all we want.
On that note, just on all of the comments, thank you all for the engagement and the conversation afterwards. I think that's always some of the most powerful part of the presentation. I mean, the information's amazing, but then the dialogue that it sparks and the unplanned conversation from Dr. Kerns, I think, is always very helpful. 2 things that came to mind while you were talking. Dr. Kerns referenced assessment and practice ways that Renaissance incorporates the focus skills into our programs. If you want information about STAR or Freckle in particular and how it can support, especially high school, STAR is the only assessment that goes up through grade 12. There is a brochure back there that just has like super basic stuff in it, but then it'll at least spark your mind to remember to ask somebody. Freckle in particular, as you talk about how to accelerate through multiple grades, you can turn that on to only focus skills, so students are practicing where they are at, and it is bringing them up through their own personalized pathway on the focus skills, so it's a great way to help support that intervention.
And I could say our district uses STAR and Freckle. First time was this year. We started in the fall, and we have seen enormous gains.
Say that louder.
We really have. We've seen enormous gains in our students that are using STAR and Freckle, and so it's been very good.
Learning, progression, construct, focus skills piece, it is deep in our DNA. I mean, everything that we do is guided by making sure we really understand the content, we really understand the sequence, we understand when it's difficult, and then if you can see, that immediately becomes prioritization. So when I turn a content team loose to start writing lessons, we don't write lessons on the superfluous stuff. We're like, okay, how do you deal with both the focus skills and in particularly the trip step ones, those most essential skills that are the hardest ones for kids. So we then use it to guide everything else that we do. So it's really deep in our DNA, and it just manifests itself in multiple ways.
So grab a brochure on your way out if you want information about either of those. That's not what this is about, but just since he was talking about specifically STAR and Freckle, that information is back there. The other thing I wanted to say is Jean is here today because these two lovely women saw Jean speak somewhere else. Anytime that we have the opportunity to bring Jean in to touch a large group of, or geography even, Chicago's a big place, and not everybody can always travel geographically between the regions. So if you have an opportunity through an organization you're a part of, or Lake County, DuPage County, whatever, some way through a group that you can connect with, if you have a space to host it, let me know, and I'm happy to coordinate to bring him back to reach to a group of people. We had a superintendent from the state conference ask if we could bring him in to speak to the school board group in Lake County as an example, because he's like, my school board needs to hear this information because it would help them understand kind of what we're dealing with as well. So I just want to put that bug in your ear. That's how Katie, heard him talk at Level Up, and at the end of the session came over and said, how can I get him to this group here? So if that opportunity exists for you, please reach out. Otherwise, thank you so much for having us. Thank you to Lewis University for hosting. Thank you, Gene, for flying in. He's heading out for places great and far this weekend to do some talking overseas, Abu Dhabi and Qatar. So
700.
He came to Lockport first, and then he's heading to Abu Dhabi and Qatar. So
I think Daisy's got something in the back.
So thank you for traveling. We really appreciate it.
Daisy was waving back. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Is that covering some of what you did?
Yeah, it is. So you've got the overview on the Resource Center here. We have two series that I did one that I started and other people have done it. If you go to renaissance.com/videos, we have a short series called Assess Minutes. It's like one idea about a hard topic in assessment, and most of them are product free. So it's just like, what's a grade level equivalence score? What's the difference between performance on criterion reference versus norm reference? But what Daisy's referencing is our new masterclass series. That is, okay, that's a more hard concept. It's going to take the master or the assess minutes are chalk talk, one image, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. If you go to renaissance.com/resources/masterclass, that's my new video series. There is a whole masterclass just on learning progressions, focus skills, authentic Spanish focus skills. So those are 15 to 20 minutes depending upon the topic, but it is like a more technical behind-the-scenes review of a lot of what we talked about today.
Katie or Lori, one of them sent out the email yesterday with the map and the parking pass and whatnot for today. So I think most of your emails were on there. So I will send a link to the masterclass section so you have it. I will send the assessments as well, just because those aren't going to be in his Nearpod deck. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, thank you. We'll turn it over for you to do your CADCA business now. Wish you a wonderful long weekend, and hopefully the weather stays beautiful.
Yeah.
And thanks for having us. We really appreciate it. Lori and Katie, thank you.
Thanks, y'all.